When words fade into the stillness, a timeless truth emerges, a whisper that speaks not to the mind but to the soul. This book is your invitation to hear that whisper, to awaken the transformative power that has always resided within you. Inspired by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky's The Voice of the Silence, a masterpiece written in 1889 and rooted in ancient Eastern teachings, this work reimagines her universal wisdom for the challenges and aspirations of the modern world. Far from being a relic of the past, Blavatsky's teachings continue to resonate, offering profound insights into the human spirit and its connection to the infinite universe. Blavatsky, a central figure in the Theosophical Society, dedicated her life to unraveling the mysteries that unite spiritual traditions across cultures. Her writings draw from ancient Tibetan wisdom, calling seekers to silence the noise of the external world and listen to the voice within, a voice that holds the key to higher understanding and spiritual awakening. In these pages, you won't find a mere repetition of her words. Instead, you'll embark on a deeply personal and transformative journey, reinterpreted for today's seeker. Each chapter serves as a guidepost, offering reflections, vivid metaphors, and questions designed to spark introspection. It is a map to help you navigate life's complexities with clarity, resilience, and a perspective that transcends the visible. This book is more than philosophy. It's a call to action. It is a call to pause, to listen, and to rediscover the light within you that has never dimmed, regardless of how loud or dark the world around you may seem. Through its pages, may you find not just inspiration, but the tools to transform your everyday challenges into steps toward the eternal truth that whispers in silence. Like dreams we have yet to dream, the night seemed alive, whispering truths only the brave could hear. I sat beneath an ancient tree, its gnarled bark pressing against my back when I first felt it. Not a question in words, but a presence, a pulse. Who am I really? It wasn't a scream nor a whisper, but something deeper, a sensation like the wind brushing your skin or the echo of a melody you don't remember hearing, but instinctively know. Is this all I am? That night marked the beginning of my awakening, though I didn't know it yet. For years I had been sleepwalking, not the kind of sleep that rests the body, but a fog that cloaks the soul. Routine, fear, and borrowed expectations had dulled the light within me. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt as though you were following a path you didn't choose, a map someone else drew for you? In the stillness of that moment, the noise of the world seemed to fall away, and something different stirred inside me. A murmur, a spark, a memory of what I had once been before becoming what I thought I had to be. That is the essence of awakening. Not a beginning, but a return. My grandfather once told me a story when I was a child, one that stayed with me even when I didn't fully understand it. He described a golden bird imprisoned within a crystal cage. From inside, the bird could see the sky, the mountains, and clouds drifting like whispers of the wind. But the bird never dared to fly, afraid it might shatter the cage. One day, consumed by longing, it began to sing. Its song was so pure, so true, that the crystal dissolved, freeing the bird to soar. What was the cage? I had asked him. His eyes, wise with years, softened as he replied, "The cage, my child, is the one we build with our doubts, our fears, and the labels we accept as our identity. But the song, that is the truth of who you are. No one can silence that truth but you." Sitting beneath the tree that night, I realized I was that bird. Every decision made out of fear of judgment, every dream sacrificed for comfort, every time I silenced my voice to meet someone else's expectations, I had built my own crystal prison, and the most painful realization, I had stopped singing. With my eyes closed, I let the silence envelop me. I asked myself, what is holding me back? At first, the answers came quickly, excuses parading through my mind, no time, too many responsibilities, fear of failure. But when those voices quieted, something deeper emerged. Nothing was holding me back except myself. So what was I waiting for? The soul doesn't awaken with shouts or demands. It stirs like the first light of dawn, gently illuminating the darkness. It fills you with a certainty that defies explanation, a warmth that doesn't come from without but from within. It whispers, "You have always been more than you believed. All you need is to remember." This remembering is not instantaneous. It's a process, a journey fraught with challenges. Awakening the soul means confronting yourself, facing the truths you've ignored and the fears you've buried. But it also means discovering a freedom that isn't tied to possessions or external validation. It's the freedom that comes from reconnecting with something infinite, something that has always been within you. That night, under the stars, I made a promise, not to the version of myself I had known, but to the being I was just beginning to discover. I vowed to listen to that quiet, persistent voice that had always called to me, even when I had tried to drown it out. I vowed to shatter the cage, even if I feared what lay beyond its confines. The path to silence is not a straight road. It's a winding trail, thorny and uneven, pricking your pride, ego, and certainty. I once walked through a forest after a heavy rain, and the mud clung to my feet, making every step arduous. But as I trudged forward, I became more aware of my own presence, of the weight and effort of each step. The path to silence is much the same. You can't force it or rush it. You must move through it patiently, letting each moment transform you. Why do we fear silence? I asked myself. Silence strips us bare, without distractions, excuses, or masks. The apparent emptiness lays bare everything we are, a terrifying realization for many. What if we don't like what we find? But silence does not judge. It doesn't accuse or condemn, it simply reveals. It offers a space to see, hear, and recognize. And in that recognition, transformation begins. I once heard a story about a monk who sought enlightenment for years. He prayed, meditated, and studied, yet always felt something was missing. One day, in frustration, he sat by a river and vowed not to move until he understood what he was seeking. Days passed with no change. Then, as he stared into the water, he saw a single leaf drift down and sink gently beneath the surface. At that moment, he realized his mind was like the river. Only when he stopped stirring the waters with his thoughts could he see clearly what had always been there. The journey to awakening is like that. It's not about becoming something new, but uncovering what has always been. It's about breaking the cages we've built and letting the truth of who we are finally sing. What is your cage? And when will you let yourself begin to sing? The river of silence, ever present and eternal, awaits the courage of stillness to unveil its depths. Stepping onto its path necessitates bravery, the ability to remain unwavering in the face of overwhelming urges to run. In stillness, the chaos of thoughts transforms. They no longer control but drift like passing clouds, mere echoes of what once seemed unshakable. In this emptiness, something profound awakens, a connection to the eternal. While we cannot silence the world's noise, we can diminish its influence. True silence does not live outside us. It resides within, a sanctuary that exists in all moments. It is the tranquility in the midst of chaos, a sanctuary that remains unaffected by the surrounding chaos. But reaching this space is not easy. Impatience, discomfort, and doubt will try to pull you back. However, perseverance will lead you to understand that silence is not a search, but a constant presence. It is the core of your being, an eternal spark that requires no words to shine. The journey to silence mirrors the passage through 3 sacred vestibules, each one leading deeper into the truth. These are not mere destinations, but thresholds of transformation. The first vestibule is ignorance, not an insult but a mirror. It reflects the state in which we live by appearances, mistaking possessions, titles, and external validation for identity. It is comfortable, even seductive, because it demands nothing of us. But this comfort is a prison, built on borrowed ideas and expectations. Only when a voice within begins to question, "Is this all I am?" does the path forward reveal itself. This questioning leads to the second vestibule, instruction. Here the journey commences genuinely, not by gaining knowledge, but by dispelling illusions. To learn, one must first unlearn. This is not about seeking definitive answers, but about dismantling falsehoods. Each truth revealed feels less like a gain and more like a letting go. The instruction teaches us that everything is transient, that what arises will also fade. Finally, the third vestibule is wisdom. This is not a place one reaches by effort or merit, but a state that finds you when you are ready. Wisdom is not about knowing, it is about being. It is the essence of experience, the understanding that surpasses words. It is the light that remains when all else falls away. In the stillness of the third vestibule, one encounters the unstruck sound, the silence that speaks without vibration, a resonance that arises from the deepest part of one's being. You cannot hear it with your ears, but your soul must experience it. This is the soundless language of truth, the eternal hum of existence that whispers, "You are not separate from what you seek. You are the garden you long to enter." As you walk this path, ask yourself, where are you now? Are you still gazing at the garden's gates, standing in ignorance? Are you among the flowers, unraveling the lessons of instruction? Or have you glimpsed, even for a moment, the infinite stillness of wisdom? Whatever your answer, the river of silence flows within, waiting for your first step into its embrace. When they told me to listen to the silence for the first time, I became frustrated. "Listen," they said, "and the unstruck sound will reveal itself." But how do you hear something that has no form? For days I sat in quiet, straining to detect something, anything. But all I found was the chaotic noise of my own thoughts, roaring like a disorganized choir. Have you ever felt this? Have you ever experienced an internal clamor that persists, despite the stillness surrounding you? It was then that I realized the problem wasn't in the silence, but in me. My mind expected the unstruck sound to be like any other, a noise arising from outside to fill the void. But this sound is not external. It isn't about adding to the world around you. It's about stripping away what clutters within. It is not something you search for, but something you allow. One night, in stillness, I gave up trying to understand. I stopped forcing and seeking, and I simply let things be. That's when it happened. Not a sound in the way we know it, but a vibration, a subtle presence, as if the entire universe was breathing in harmony with me. This is the mystery of the unstruck sound. It is not something you hear, it is something that listens to you. The unstruck sound is the heartbeat of the cosmos, a silent call that resonates in the deepest part of your being. It waits, patiently, for you to quiet your mind and open your heart. It is a reminder that you are not separate from the universe. What you seek outside already lives within. The journey to find this connection is not simple or serene. It is a dance between light and shadow, between the truth of who you are and the fears you carry. Initially, the path evokes a sense of enchantment, as if the universe is revealing each door to you. Signs guide your steps, and you sense that you're moving toward something greater than yourself. However, the situation changes. What once flowed freely becomes turbulent. Clarity turns to doubt, and peace to storms. This is when you meet the destructor. It does not come as an external foe, but rises from within, a whisper of every unhealed wound, every hidden fear, every limiting belief you've clung to. Who are you to seek the infinite? It asks. You're not enough. This is a waste of time. The destructor is not your enemy. It is your mirror reflecting everything you fear to face. It feeds on doubt, yet it exists not to destroy you, but to test you. Only by confronting it can you uncover your true selves. The unstruck sound lives in the spaces we often overlook, the pause between heartbeats, the stillness between breaths. It is the quiet between the noise, the reflection of the infinite in the calm waters of your soul. Like a lake stilled after a storm, it reveals the sky within you when the mind ceases its endless ripples. To hear it, you must be still. To feel it, you must let go. And in that surrender, you'll find that the unstruck sound has always been there, eternal, waiting for you to remember. There was a night, darker than most, when I found myself adrift in a storm of my own making. I had been meditating, seeking that elusive stillness everyone spoke of, but instead of peace, I unearthed a torrent of thoughts. Every mistake, every failure, and every cruel word ever spoken to me surged forward, a cacophony so deafening it seemed to drown out the silence I so desperately sought. It was then that I met the destructor, not an external force but a presence rising from within, dragging shadows from the depths of my mind. It whispered insidious doubts, telling me to give up, to walk away. "What's the point?" it taunted. "Why bother?" In that suffocating darkness, a faint voice emerged. Not loud, not commanding, but steady. "Look at it," it urged. At first I hesitated. How could I possibly confront something so vast, so overwhelming? Yet the voice persisted. "The destructor only holds power if you run from it." So I stayed. I didn't flee, I didn't fight, I simply observed. What happened next unraveled everything I thought I knew. As I faced my fears, they began to dissolve, like fog retreating under the morning sun. Beneath their heavy veil, I discovered something unexpected: fear itself. The destructor was not my enemy, but a fragment of me, clinging desperately to the identity I had built over the years. It wasn't trying to destroy me. It was terrified of being transformed. It was my ego resisting the unknown, afraid of losing control. In that moment, I understood a truth that shifted my entire perspective. The destructor isn't there to halt your progress, but to catalyze your growth. Without its fire, there can be no purification, no transformation. Just as gold must endure heat to become pure, the soul must pass through trials to evolve. Every time the destructor appears, it offers a choice: retreat or advance. And even though the path forward is daunting, it is the only way to freedom. There is an ancient teaching that speaks of walking through fire without being burned. That fire is the destructor. It is the crucible where illusions are burned away, leaving only what is real. But here lies the secret. You don't defeat the destructor. You understand it. You see it for what it truly is, and in doing so you strip it of its power. It ceases to be an adversary and becomes a teacher. I once remembered a river from my childhood, a place where two currents met, one gentle and serene, the other wild and turbulent. I feared the chaotic current for years, until the day I finally stepped into it. What I discovered was that beneath the surface chaos, the river was the same. The turbulence was merely the top layer, below there was calm. The destructor is much like that chaotic current. It appears as chaos, but beneath it flows the same force that guides you toward truth. The task is not to avoid it, but to learn how to move with it, to let it propel you forward rather than hold you back. This process of facing the destructor led me to another realization. Inner harmony is not something you achieve by conquering the noise or chaos of life. It isn't a prize waiting at the end of years of struggle. It has always resided within you, patiently awaiting recognition. Yet in a world that urges us to seek validation and answers outside of ourselves, looking inward can feel like an impossible luxury. And still, it is the only place where harmony truly resides. There was a day, ordinary in every sense, when the word harmony shifted from being an abstract concept to something tangible. It wasn't a moment of grand revelation, but a quiet pause, a stillness that wrapped itself around me. The world's noise, notifications on my phone, endless tasks and hollow conversations, had consumed me. Feeling untethered, I wandered into a forgotten park and sat on an old bench, expecting nothing. In that unassuming stillness, I heard something I had long ignored, the rhythm of my own heartbeat. It wasn't the frenetic thoughts racing through my mind, but a deeper, quieter pulse, a presence that had always been there, waiting for me to notice. That moment taught me that harmony is not the absence of chaos. Life will never be devoid of challenges or storms. Harmony is finding your center amidst it all, discovering an unshakable core that remains steady no matter how turbulent the surface becomes. It's not about controlling every aspect of life, but about choosing how to move through it. The path to harmony is deceptively simple. It doesn't require more effort, more practice, or more striving. In fact, it requires the opposite: letting go. One night, exhausted from trying, I stopped chasing harmony altogether. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and allowed everything to simply be. In that surrender, I felt something extraordinary. Harmony was not a goal to achieve, but a memory to cherish. It was already there, woven into the fabric of my being, waiting for me to stop long enough to see it. Harmony, like the rhythm of breath, is a dance between receiving and releasing, between holding on and letting go. We uncover it, not create it. Destructors and life storms guide us toward harmony, not destroy it. They strip away the unnecessary, leaving behind only what truly matters. To find harmony, we must embrace the chaos, observe it without fear, and remember that beneath it all, we are already whole. Every day we view the world through countless filters, our past experiences, fears, and expectations. What we see is not reality itself, but a story our mind hastily constructs. But what happens when those filters dissolve? What remains when we perceive the world and ourselves with pure clarity? I remember the day I began to grasp this truth. After a storm, I stepped outside for a walk. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth, and sunlight danced on the droplets clinging to the leaves, creating countless tiny stars. For a moment my worries disappeared. I wasn't thinking or analyzing. I was simply observing. In that stillness, something shifted. The world ceased to feel like a distant landscape. It became a vibrant space I inhabited deeply. Have you ever had one of those fleeting moments when time seems to pause and everything sharpens into extraordinary clarity? It's not something you can fake, but when it happens, you realize how much your thoughts have obscured life. This is the essence of pure perception, to see without the distortions of the mind. Yet reaching that clarity is no simple task. The mind, like a restless river, refuses to calm simply by your wish. It floods every quiet moment with noise, judgments, comparisons, endless chatter. Right, wrong, better, worse. These incessant evaluations veil what's truly in front of us. Once a teacher told me, pure perception isn't about finding truth, it's about ceasing to project your lies. At first I didn't understand. What lies? However, as I observed my thoughts, the truth became evident. Every day I wrote stories about myself, others, and how life should be. It was as if I lived inside a theater, playing the roles of playwright, actor, and audience all at once. The art of pure perception begins with a simple but transformative act. Stopping. Stop running. Stop trying to change what you see. Stop labeling every experience. Just be. At first, it feels uncomfortable, even boring. But if you persist, something extraordinary happens. Reality begins to reveal itself as it is. I recall an exercise that changed how I viewed the world. They asked me to gaze at a flower for 10 minutes, refraining from naming it, analyzing it, or drawing comparisons with anything. At first, my mind rebelled, desperate to categorize and judge. But as I continued, the flower ceased to be just a flower. It became an intricate universe of colors, textures, and movement. It didn't need to be anything more than itself, and in that moment, I understood that neither did I. Pure perception extends beyond simply observing the world. It's also a mirror reflecting who you are. When you strip away the stories you've told yourself, I'm not enough. I must prove my worth. I should be better. What remains is the silent observer, the unchanging witness who has always been there. Practicing pure perception doesn't require elaborate rituals or distant retreats. Start small. The next time you drink a glass of water, pause. Watch how the light dances in the liquid. Feel the cool weight of the glass in your hands. Listen to the sound as it pours. Be fully present in that moment. It may seem trivial, but in these tiny acts of attention, the world transforms. There's an old story about a disciple who asked his teacher how to find enlightenment. Instead of answering, the teacher took him for a long walk through mountains and valleys. Finally, they stopped by a stream. "What do you see?" the teacher asked. The disciple replied, "A stream, rocks, and trees." The teacher smiled and said, "Look again." This time, the disciple didn't try to interpret, he simply observed. The stream ceased to be just water flowing over rocks. It became movement, life, and connection. In that moment, he understood that enlightenment wasn't about seeing something extraordinary, but seeing the ordinary with new eyes. Pure perception doesn't change the world, it changes how you experience it. The landscape of your life doesn't need altering, only the lens through which you view it. This shift reveals a deeper truth. What you've been searching for outside has always been within. Dhyana, the power of deep meditation, is like this. You cannot force it. It is not a technique to master, but a state to allow. I remember my first attempt at sitting in silence. My mind became a storm of thoughts, louder and more chaotic with every passing second. Frustrated, I wondered why I couldn't calm my mind. That frustration itself served as the first lesson. One cannot force peace, just as one cannot command the wind to blow. I once heard someone say, "The river doesn't need to cease its flow to achieve peace." Peace is in its depths. This changed everything. Dhyana is not about halting the stream of thoughts, but settling into the stillness beneath their surface. It is the quiet depth where you stop identifying with the waves and recognize yourself as the river itself. One afternoon, as I sat beneath a tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves painted shifting patterns on the ground. In that timeless moment, all else vanished. The distant hum of traffic, my racing thoughts, even my sense of self. What remained was a profound completeness. This was dhyana. Not happiness or sadness, but something far deeper. On certain days, solitude feels akin to facing a tempest. Thoughts come like relentless gusts, dragging you with them. What should I do with these thoughts? I once asked someone wiser. Let them pass, they said. And so I learned. Thoughts are like clouds. No matter how dense they are, they cannot obscure the sky. You are the sky. Once I heard a story about an old man who, nearing the end of his life, was asked what he had learned above all else. The simple yet profound answer he gave was, "I learned to watch the fire without burning." This statement captures a truth often overlooked in the rush of daily life. It is the essence of inner stillness, a state where you can observe the flames of your thoughts, your fears, desires, and frustrations, without letting them consume you. You don't extinguish the fire. You simply realize that you are not the flames. The power of this practice lies not in what it removes, but in what it unveils. Sitting in silence isn't about striving to become someone different or achieving a transcendent state. It's about returning to your core, to the unshakable essence of who you are. What you find there is vast and indescribable, like an endless ocean where all the illusions of identity dissolve, leaving only the pure experience of being. Why does this matter? A restless mind can cause you to react impulsively, resist reality, and avoid discomfort. But when you connect to that deep space of inner quiet, your relationship with life changes. The chaos of the world doesn't vanish, but you no longer feel tethered to its turbulence. You become the observer, someone who can witness the waves without being swept away, and someone who can walk through fire without being burned. One morning, as I sat in silence, something subtle yet transformative occurred. It wasn't a grand revelation or an extraordinary vision. It was simply a deep connection to the life around me, the rustling of leaves, the cool breeze, even the distant hum of the city. These things, which once seemed like distractions, became part of me, and I, in turn, became part of them. In that quiet moment, I realized something profound. The universe isn't separate from us. It's within us. This understanding extends beyond brief periods of meditation. It's a thread that weaves through our entire existence, connecting us to something infinite and unshakable. Some call it intuition, others divine consciousness. To me, it feels like a silver thread, delicate yet unbreakable, linking the seen and the unseen, the finite and the eternal. This thread is the bridge between the doubting mind and the knowing soul, between external chaos and inner calm. I first encountered this idea as a restless seeker, endlessly looking outward for answers. I devoured books, sought mentors, and collected teachings as if they were treasures that would complete me. Yet, no matter how much I gathered, the emptiness inside remained. It wasn't until an old traveler shared some quiet words with me that the situation started to change. "Stop looking outside," he said. "The true guide has always been within you." At first I dismissed his words. How could I trust an inner voice when my mind was filled with doubts and contradictions? Sensing my hesitation, he added, "The silver thread never breaks, but you can only feel it in silence." That phrase stayed with me, nudging me toward an inward journey. I began to watch my thoughts and emotions as if they were reflections in a mirror. I noticed how the harder I tried to control everything, the more disconnected I felt from this inner thread. However, when I relinquished control and allowed life to unfold, it remained, gently guiding me like a gentle whisper. The silver thread isn't something you can see or touch. It's an experience, a quiet knowing that there is something within you that has always understood the way forward, even when you feel lost. It serves as a gentle reminder to persist, even when the path ahead appears uncertain. It's the calm reassurance that, no matter how fierce the storm, it will pass. This inner guide doesn't shout or demand. It waits patiently like a friend at the threshold, knowing that one day you'll open the door. But to hear it, you must quiet the noise of the world and of your own restless mind. I remember walking through an autumn forest, golden leaves swirling in the air, the ground crisp beneath my steps. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming clarity, as though everything around me was alive and connected to something vast and unnameable. I wasn't walking alone. Something within me, something that had always been there, was walking too. That was the moment I understood that the guide we seek isn't external. It's a memory waiting to surface, a truth that has always been part of us. It isn't bound by time or place. It exists in every moment we allow ourselves to be fully present, without masks or pretenses. It's the part of you that has always been awake, patiently waiting for you to awaken too. When people ask how to find this silver thread, I tell them this: you don't find it because it's never been lost. All you need to do is stop. Stop running, stop searching. Just be still and listen. Not with your ears, but with your heart. Look at your life, your joys, your sorrows, your triumphs, and your struggles. Observe how each experience has woven a perfect pattern, guided by this guiding thread. Even in your darkest moments when you felt most alone, this thread was there, connecting you to your deepest truth. This inner guide doesn't offer straightforward answers or promise a smooth path, but it reminds you of your strength, showing you that every step, no matter how uncertain, is part of a greater journey. It's the quiet beacon in the fog, not illuminating the entire road, but offering just enough light for the next step. There is an ancient story about a traveler who sought wisdom in the mountains. After a long and arduous journey, he reached the summit and found a solitary cabin. Inside, instead of the powerful master he had envisioned, there was only a mirror. Frustration welled up within him. Had someone deceived him? But as he gazed into the mirror, something shifted. His reflection was no longer just an image. It became a tapestry of all he had endured, all he had learned, and all he was yet to become. At that moment, the traveler understood. The master he sought had always been within him. The essence of the silver thread, the unbroken connection between who we are and who we can be, between the transient and the eternal, is captured in this story. No matter how disconnected we may feel, this infinite source never truly separates us. It exists quietly within us, waiting for moments of stillness to emerge. Often, life drowns it out, but sitting in silence, not to demand answers or clarity, but to be, reveals it. Initially, there may be only chaos, but persistence turns that silence into a gentle nudge that everything is right. That is the silver thread. By following it, you do not find a separate teacher but uncover the truest part of yourself. To embrace this connection, one must learn the art of letting go. Renunciation often carries a connotation of loss, but what if it is not about losing but gaining freedom? What if surrendering what weighs us down allows space for something far greater to enter? In a tumultuous phase of my life, I came to understand that renunciation is not the end of something, but the beginning of what truly matters. That metaphor stayed with me, and I began to see the countless full cups I carried. Old wounds, unrealistic expectations, paralyzing fears. Slowly, imperfectly, I began to empty them, creating space for something purer and more authentic. Letting go does not mean abandoning everything or becoming detached from what you love. It requires the courage to look within and ask, does this serve me? Does it help me grow, or does it keep me trapped? It is a daily practice like pruning a tree, not to destroy it but to allow it to flourish. One afternoon as I walked along the shore, I watched the waves retreat and return with effortless rhythm. The tide never clings to the water it releases, it simply flows. At that moment I understood that nature itself is designed to let go. Trees shed their leaves in autumn, flowers release their petals, and rivers do not grasp the stones in their path. If nature can surrender without resistance, why do we struggle so much? Renunciation is not about losing something, but allowing what has always been essential to emerge. When people ask me how to know when it is time to let go, I offer this: when the weight of holding on outweighs the love of carrying it. Perhaps you should release anything that makes you feel smaller, confined, or disconnected from yourself. This is not an act of rejection, but rather an act of self-love. This journey of surrender and connection leads to the dissolution of one of humanity's greatest illusions, separateness. We perceive ourselves as self-contained, isolated islands, yet what if this belief is nothing more than a mirage? What if every wall we build to protect ourselves is also a barrier to the deeper connection we crave? There was a time in my life when separateness was my refuge. I prided myself on independence, convinced I needed no one. But the more I achieved, the emptier I felt, as though some vital piece was missing. A conversation with a friend shattered this illusion. "Have you ever felt like a wave in the ocean?" they asked. At first, I didn't understand. They explained, "Waves appear individual, but they are never separate from the sea. They are the sea, moving in different forms. You too are like that. You believe you are alone, but you are always part of something greater." That metaphor unraveled the false walls I had built. I began to see how separateness had shaped my life, turning achievements into hollow victories and relationships into guarded exchanges. The ego, which promises individuality, becomes a cage when it dominates. True freedom comes not from destroying the ego, but from seeing it for what it is, a tool, not a master. Once, as I stood atop a mountain after an exhausting climb, I looked out at the vast range stretching endlessly before me. At that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of unity. I was not separate from the mountains, wind, or sky. My breath, my efforts, and even my fatigue were part of the same vast organism. The idea of separateness dissolved, leaving only connection. When we let go of the illusion of separateness, our lives transform. We move from competition to collaboration, from judgment to understanding, from guarding ourselves to opening up. We realize that every thought, word, and action ripples outward, shaping the world far beyond our perception. And in this awareness, we return to the silver thread, the inner master, and the infinite truth that we were never truly alone. There is an ancient story of a monk who, during deep meditation, glimpsed a vision, a boundless fabric woven from threads of light. Every movement at one point sent ripples through the entire structure, connecting each thread to another. When his meditation ended, the monk said, "Now I understand there are no others. Every wound I inflict is a wound upon myself. Every act of love heals the world." This fabric of light is real, even if unseen. Each of us is a thread, and every interaction we have either strengthens or weakens the weave. We are blinded to this truth by the illusion of separateness, leading us to believe that we are isolated, disconnected, and alone. Yet this belief is nothing but a mirage. The connection persists, perpetually awaiting recognition. When life feels heavy or lonely, pause to see how everything you do and are is connected. There is no need for grand gestures. Sometimes the smallest acts, a word of kindness, a moment of gratitude, are the ones that resonate most deeply. In those moments, the ego softens and the truth emerges. Independence is not freedom. True freedom lies in recognizing that interdependence is the essence of life. This realization transforms the world. Strangers become mirrors, reflecting pieces of yourself, and the world ceases to be a battleground, becoming instead a home. You no longer feel isolated, but held by an invisible current that has always been there. Like a wave that never stops being part of the ocean, you begin to see that you've never been separate from the whole. On the spiritual path, there comes a moment when you face a crossroads, a fork in the road where two paths seem to offer entirely different promises. one wide and golden, seems to lead to personal peace, the fulfillment of your deepest desires, and the culmination of all your efforts. The other is narrow, shadowed, and uncertain, beckoning you towards sacrifice and service without any guarantee of reward. This is the moment of the two paths, and choosing between them is no simple task. The first time I encountered this crossroads, I did not realize what it meant. I had spent years searching for answers, striving to understand myself and the world. I believed my spiritual journey was about attaining personal enlightenment, a state of perfect peace and transcendence. Yet, just as I thought I was nearing this goal, a deeper question arose within me. Why do you seek this? Is it for yourself, or for something greater? This question halted me abruptly. I had always thought of my journey as deeply personal, a solitary pursuit of my own growth. But now, standing at this crossroads, I began to see another possibility, to take what I had learned, what I had gained, and use it for the benefit of others. This realization wasn't comforting. It was terrifying. It meant letting go of my vision of a serene and perfect destination. It meant stepping onto the more difficult path. I wondered why I couldn't walk both paths. Why not seek inner peace while also serving others? At some point, one path must take precedence. The first path invites you to rest in your spiritual achievements, while the second asks you to rise again and carry the burdens of the world. The first path is not wrong. It is natural to seek peace and refuge for the soul, but it carries a hidden danger, the temptation to stop, to settle, to believe that your journey ends with you. The second route is distinct. It is the way of kindness, of service, of deciding to face the suffering of the world and declare, I am here to help. The path is not simple. It necessitates consistent work and a readiness to accept the unpredictability of changing things. It makes me think of a story about a sage who heard the laments of people who were still suffering behind him after entering the gates of eternal heaven. He chose to mentor others instead of entering bliss, forgoing his own freedom in the interest of the greater good. The bodhisattva, the one who chose to return to the chaos and be a light, follows that road. I was challenged by this narrative that kept coming back to me. What would I do in the situation? Even today, what route am I on? Although it might not seem like it, we all have to deal with this juncture in our lives. We make many tiny decisions every day, deciding whether to behave only for our own gain or to think about the effects of our actions on others. I realized during a brief meditation session that these two routes are not as distinct as they first appear to be. There are several stages to the voyage. You cannot give what you do not have, so you must first discover your own truth and serenity. What you will do with that serenity, however, is the real question, not if you can sleep in it. The crossroads is not a destination. Rather, it is a call to broaden your purpose and let your own development spill out into other people's lives. In the end, it does not matter which path you choose first, because both lead to the same realization. We are not separate. To help others is to help yourself. To heal the world, you must heal yourself. The tapestry of light, the ocean and its waves, the crossroads, all are reminders of one truth. We are part of something infinitely greater, and in that connection, we find the heart of who we are. The first time I heard about the doctrine of the heart, I imagined it as an esoteric teaching, something reserved for the spiritually advanced or hidden in ancient manuscripts. But it wasn't in a temple or a sacred book that I encountered its essence. Instead, it emerged in the simplest of moments, so ordinary that I almost overlooked it. I was sitting in a park, watching a small child struggle to lift a toy that was too heavy for his tiny hands. His efforts were futile, yet before I could step in, another child, slightly older, abandoned his own game and helped him without hesitation. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a pure and instinctive act of kindness. That fleeting moment revealed something profound. The doctrine of the heart is remembered, not learned. It is the quiet voice within us that knows life is not about acquiring or conquering, but about connecting, sharing, and being present for others. The doctrine of the heart transcends logic. Unlike the doctrine of the eye, which relies on what is tangible and measurable, the heart's wisdom sees beyond appearances. The eye categorizes and divides, teaching us to perceive the world as separate fragments. The heart, however, invites us to see with the soul, to recognize the unity behind the multiplicity. It isn't about denying reality, but about perceiving the essence that lies within it, a truth that words cannot express but the heart intuitively understands. For years I struggled to reconcile the heart's call with the world's demands. How could I live guided by the heart amidst the noise and pressures of daily life? The answer didn't come as a grand revelation, but through small, unremarkable moments. Listening to someone who needed to be heard, forgiving when my pride urged revenge, or offering a smile to a passing stranger. These acts, though simple, resonated with a depth I couldn't ignore. They reminded me that the heart doesn't speak in words. It communicates through feelings, quiet certainties that cut through doubt and hesitation. There's an old story of a disciple who asked his master the difference between the doctrine of the eye and the doctrine of the heart. Instead of answering, the master led him to a still lake and asked him to describe his reflection. The disciple spoke of his features, his eyes, his mouth, his hair. The master then stirred the water, distorting the reflection, and asked, "Now who are you?" The disciple was silent, unable to respond. The master touched his chest and said, "When you stop seeing yourself through the eye and begin to feel yourself through the heart, you will know." The heart doesn't seek validation or recognition. Competition or self-improvement do not drive it. It simply is, a spark of connection that unites your being with the world around you. Practicing this doctrine doesn't require monumental gestures. You can find it in the quiet moments when you listen beyond words, see others as reflections of yourself, and forgive not because it's easy, but because it liberates. It's trusting the inner whisper that guides you toward what is right, even when your mind doesn't understand. The heart's journey is not always straightforward. It doesn't guarantee simple travel or quick riches, but it does provide something far more significant, a meaningful life. It demonstrates that the real legacy we leave is determined by the times we decide to act out of love and connection rather than by our accomplishments or material belongings. Every action taken from the heart has an impact on other people's lives in ways we may never completely understand or observe. We will undoubtedly encounter internal obstacles, the invisible walls that exist inside of us, as we travel this route. These challenges are small but powerful, influencing our path in ways that often seem insurmountable. Often, fear comes first. It encourages us to remain familiar and whisper about safety. However, fear becomes less powerful the instant we confront it and move forth in spite of it. As we pass through it, it turns into a shadow that disappears. Pride can sometimes act as a clever barrier by disguising itself as confidence. We are tempted to think that we have reached the end of our learning curve. However, pride separates us from the humility that enables us to develop. The higher we go, the more important it is to stay grounded, and keep in mind that service, not comparison, is what truly defines greatness. Doubt is another constant companion. It questions our worth, our purpose, and our direction. But doubt, like fear, can be a teacher. Walking through it strengthens our resolve, revealing truths that only perseverance can uncover. And then there's desire, not the simple wish for basic needs, but the insatiable longing for something external to complete us. It distracts us from the deeper fulfillment that lies within. The doctrine of the heart doesn't eliminate these challenges. It transforms how we approach them. It teaches us that the obstacles are not walls to block us, but doors to growth. They lead us back to ourselves, back to the quiet truth that the heart has always known, that our greatest strength lies in connection, in love, in the profound understanding that we are never truly separate. In the end, the doctrine of the heart is a way of being that transcends the limitations of the mind. It is the realization that, in every act of love, in every moment of connection, we remember who we truly are, not isolated fragments, but integral parts of a boundless whole. Dreams, ambitions, and the fleeting highs of success shape your life. For years I chased goals I thought would bring me happiness, validation, recognition, and the intoxicating sense of winning. But the more I achieved, the emptier I felt. The truth revealed itself in a whisper that became impossible to ignore. Desire, no matter how fulfilled, never truly satisfies because it searches for something external that can only be found within. Letting go of desire doesn't mean abandoning your dreams. It means refusing to let them define your worth. It's a surrender not of hope, but of the weight of dependency. We all carry anchors from the past, relationships, expectations, and outdated beliefs that no longer serve us. They tether us to old versions of ourselves. I learned this when I had to leave behind a life that no longer resonated with who I was becoming. It felt like breaking apart, but in that breaking, I found freedom. Letting go wasn't a loss. Rather, it marked the creation of space for what was truly important. Change is inevitable, yet we resist it as though holding on to the familiar could protect us from pain. Resistance arrives as the voice of doubt. You're not ready, maybe later. But life doesn't wait for you to feel prepared. Change moves like an ocean wave. It will either crush you or teach you to rise and ride its current. When I stopped resisting, I realized that each transformation, no matter how painful, brought me closer to who I was meant to be. Also, the illusion of separateness, the belief that we are alone and disconnected from life. This deception is particularly dangerous as it persuades you to fight every battle in isolation. But connection is the key to dissolving this illusion. Every time you open yourself, share your fears, or seek comfort in another's presence, you tear down the veil of isolation. You remember that you are part of something vast and whole. You have never truly been alone. These obstacles, desire, attachment, resistance, and separateness, serve as guides rather than as enemies to overcome. They appear again and again, in different forms and at unexpected moments, offering you lessons on how to free yourself and grow. Each one reveals a part of your soul that longs to be liberated. But perhaps the hardest truth to accept is this: within you exists both shadow and light. We often cling to the idea that we must be purely good, that our worth lies in being admirable and flawless. But the harder we try to embody only light, the heavier our shadow becomes. I learned this when my shadow emerged not as something abstract, but as anger, sadness, and envy. Emotions I didn't want to accept because they didn't fit the ideal version of myself. I told myself, this isn't who I am. But denying it only made it grow stronger. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's the accumulation of everything you've rejected about yourself, the parts you fear to face. However, that shadow provides access to your most profound personal development. Why do we fear it? It serves as a constant reminder of our imperfections. But here's the paradox. The more you resist your shadow, the more control it has. The more you accept it, the less power it holds over you. The light within us represents everything we aspire to be: our compassion, our love, our connection to something greater. But light cannot exist without darkness. A candle's glow is only visible because of the surrounding night. To live only in the light is like trying to walk with one foot. You will lose balance. It was only when I embraced my shadow that I understood that true peace doesn't come from perfection. It comes from wholeness. There's an ancient story of a warrior who, after years of battle, encounters a dragon blocking his path. The dragon represents everything he fears and avoids. He fights it, but the more he resists, the stronger the dragon becomes. Exhausted, the warrior finally looks the dragon in the eyes and asks, "What do you want from me?" The dragon answers, "I don't want to defeat you. I want you to accept me because I am part of you." At that moment, the dragon disappears and the path becomes clear. Your shadow doesn't vanish when confronted. It dissolves when integrated. In that integration lies the strength to endure, the clarity to move forward, and the peace of knowing you no longer have to fight yourself. The next time your shadow appears, don't run. Sit with it, listen to it. Let it teach you. Remember that every part of you, both the parts you cherish and the ones you don't fully understand, has a purpose. When you accept your light and shadow, you no longer need to pretend. You become free to be who you truly are. And in that authenticity, you find a peace that no external achievement could ever give you. The art of patience and perseverance is like the quiet flow of a river, carving through even the hardest stones over time. Patience is the steady current, and perseverance is the riverbed guiding its path. Together, they construct pathways to our aspirations, even when all appears hopeless. But understanding them isn't enough. You must live them, feel them in those moments when time seems to stretch endlessly and results seem out of reach. I remember a time when both patience and perseverance felt absent in my life. I was working on something I cared deeply about, yet progress felt unbearably slow, insignificant compared to the mountain I still had to climb. Doubt crept in like a shadow, whispering questions I couldn't escape. Is this worth it? Why keep going when the outcome feels so distant? One afternoon, as I walked a mountain trail, I came across an old man sitting beneath a tree, carving a piece of wood. His hands, worn by time, moved with a slow but remarkable precision. Each tap of the chisel seemed tiny, but as I watched, the shape began to emerge from the block of wood. I asked him how he had so much patience for something that took so long. He smiled and said, "I don't think about how much is left, I just focus on the stroke I'm making now." That straightforward response sparked an idea in my mind. Maybe the problem wasn't how long it took. Maybe it was my obsession with controlling the result. What if, instead of rushing toward the end, I could learn to appreciate the journey itself? Patience, I realized, isn't resignation. It's trust. It's the art of letting things unfold, without forcing them, but without abandoning them either. It's like tending to a tree. You can't make it grow faster, but you can water it, make sure it gets sunlight and nurture it with care. Perseverance, on the other hand, is the quiet return to that tree each day, even when it looks like nothing is changing. Perseverance is a silent act of faith, rooted in the belief that time will yield results, even if they are not yet visible. I stopped measuring my progress by visible outcomes and began valuing every small step. I realized that even if the tree didn't bloom overnight, each drop of water was an act of love, a reminder of my purpose. Yet patience doesn't mean the absence of doubt or frustration. There will be moments when the river seems to stagnate, when the weight of perseverance feels unbearable. It's tempting then to compare your journey to others, to believe that they're moving faster, facing fewer obstacles. But comparison is the enemy of patience. It robs you of peace and blinds you to the beauty of your own path. Once, I read about the bamboo tree and it shifted my perspective. Bamboo spends years growing unseen, strengthening its roots underground before a single sprout emerges. When it finally breaks through the surface, it can grow up to 30 meters in just a few weeks. What looks like years of stillness is actually a time of preparation, of unseen growth, of building the foundation for something remarkable. You don't waste the time you spend without visible results. It's the foundation for your greatest growth. Patience and perseverance are difficult to master because we live in a world that glorifies speed, instant gratification, and immediate success. But anything worth building, a meaningful life, a profound transformation, takes time. Not just time spent waiting, but time spent learning, working, falling, and rising again. Perseverance can resemble stubbornness, akin to moving forward even when you can't see the end of the path. But each step, no matter how small, is a declaration of faith, a commitment to your purpose. And in that walk you discover that the true reward isn't reaching the goal, it's who you become as you pursue it. Upon completing the project that challenged my patience, I didn't experience the overwhelming joy I had anticipated. Instead, I felt a quiet, steady gratitude for every obstacle I had faced, for every moment when I almost gave up, but didn't. The most valuable thing I gained wasn't the result. It was the inner strength I had cultivated along the way. If you feel stuck today, if the path seems endless and your strength is waning, remember this. Patience isn't passive. It's an act of courage. Perseverance isn't a struggle. It's a vow to yourself, a promise not to abandon what you love, even when it feels difficult. The river never stops flowing, even when it moves slowly. Each strike of the old man's chisel seemed small, but together they revealed a masterpiece. Every invisible step you take today brings you closer to who you're meant to be. Trust the time, trust your effort, and remember that, like the bamboo, the most extraordinary things often take the longest to appear, but when they do, they can change everything. The path to self-discovery is not a straight road, but a journey filled with thresholds. each one demanding something different from us. One of the most profound is the portal of honesty. Here, there is no room for masks or excuses. You must look at yourself with unwavering clarity, confronting the shadows you've ignored for too long. When I crossed this portal, I was met with insecurities, fears, and ego-driven stories I had clung to for years. It was overwhelming, but I learned that only by accepting every part of myself could I begin to transform. Honesty is not an act of judgment, it is an act of love. Then came the portal of forgiveness, an invitation to release the weight of resentment, both toward others and toward oneself. We often speak of forgiving others, but sometimes the hardest person to forgive is the one staring back in the mirror. I remember a night when, after years of guilt over a past mistake, I whispered to myself, "You did the best you could at that moment. It's time to let it go." The invisible burden lifted, and the portal opened. Forgiveness is not about erasing the past, it's about freeing yourself to move forward. The portal of compassion teaches that the journey is not solely for you. What you heal, learn, and discover is meant to be shared. Compassion reveals the truth that we are not separate. The pain of another is also yours. The transformation reaches its deepest form when you bring others along with you, when your light doesn't just illuminate your path, but becomes a beacon for those still finding their way. The portal of surrender was perhaps the most difficult for me. It was not about giving up, but about releasing control and trusting the flow of life. For so long I believed that if I didn't grip every part of my journey tightly, everything would fall apart. But life cannot be forced. It unfolds as it must. Surrendering wasn't an act of weakness, but of profound trust in the process, in the understanding that sometimes stepping back allows what's meant for you to arrive without resistance. Then came the portal of unity, the final threshold where you realize that separation is an illusion. There was never any division between you and others or between you and the universe itself. Every triumph, every failure, and every heartbreak was not a fragmented story, but a single interconnected narrative leading you to your essence. Crossing this portal wasn't about discovering something external. It was about rediscovering the part of myself that had always been connected to everything that exists. This journey through the 7 portals is not a one-time achievement. It's a path you walk repeatedly, sometimes advancing, sometimes retreating. Some thresholds you will cross with ease, while others will take years of internal work. Each one offers a chance to grow, heal, and remember who you truly are. If you stand before one of these portals today, do not fear it. Each portal carries a gift, a lesson awaiting discovery. You are not alone on this path. Those who came before you had the same fears and doubts, and those who will come after you will walk similar roads, guided by the same eternal questions. The portals are not barriers meant to stop you. They are invitations to dive deeper, to shed what you are not, and to remember who you've always been. Crossing them will not make you someone new. It will make you more fully yourself, more authentic, more free. Through all of this, there is a profound truth. Within you, light and shadow coexist. For years, I believed that only light mattered. I pushed myself to be good, to be admired, to be worthy of praise. Yet the harder I tried to shine, the heavier my shadow became. It was as though, by ignoring it, I had given it more power. When my shadow finally emerged, it wasn't abstract, it was anger, doubt, and envy. I denied it, convinced it wasn't me, but denial only strengthened it. The shadow isn't an enemy to defeat. It is a part of you waiting to be acknowledged, understood, and integrated. It holds the pain you've rejected, the fears you've avoided, and paradoxically, the key to your greatest growth. We fear the shadow because it reminds us of our imperfections. But here lies the paradox. The more you resist it, the more control it has. The more you accept it, the less power it holds over you. The light within you represents your highest self, your compassion, your love, your divine connection. But light cannot exist without darkness. A candle only shines in the night. To live only in the light is like trying to walk with one leg. You will lose balance. True peace is found in wholeness, not perfection. In an ancient story, a warrior confronts a dragon that embodies all his fears. He fights it relentlessly, but the more he resists, the stronger it becomes. Exhausted, the warrior finally asks, "What do you want from me?" The dragon responds, "I want you to accept me because I am part of you." At that moment, the dragon vanishes and the path becomes clear. Your shadow doesn't disappear when confronted. It dissolves when integrated. The greatest light is born out of the acceptance of darkness. In that embrace, you become indestructible. The next time you face your shadow, don't run. Sit with it. Let it speak. It has something to teach you. Each part of you, even the parts you least understand, has a purpose. By accepting your light and shadow, you stop trying to be someone else. In that freedom, you find the peace of finally being who you were always meant to be. As I strolled in the rain, I experienced a sudden epiphany. Each drop seemed to hold a universe, and I realized that life doesn't need to be understood in order to be lived. Wisdom isn't the answer. It's the question that invites you to explore more deeply. In that quiet unfolding, I discovered the essence of compassion, opening yourself to the world's pain without closing off, witnessing suffering without judgment, and responding with love. Compassion doesn't require grand gestures. It reveals itself in the smallest of moments. A shared glance, a gentle word, a silent act of kindness. It's the recognition of another as a reflection of yourself. However, the mind functions similarly to a mirror, reflecting everything from fleeting thoughts to overwhelming emotions. But what happens when dust covers that mirror? The reflections become distorted, and we no longer see reality as it is, but as a fractured version shaped by our fears, desires, and unprocessed emotions. I didn't understand this until I became trapped in my own restless thoughts. Something felt off, but I couldn't name it. I filled my days with distractions, work, conversations, noise, anything to silence the unease. Yet it lingered, like a whisper I couldn't drown out. One day, someone close to me said, "Maybe you don't need more answers. Maybe you need to look within." That night, for the first time in a long while, I sat in silence. At first, it was unbearable. My mind swarmed with thoughts, each louder than the last. They spun like leaves in the wind, blocking any sense of clarity. But slowly, something shifted. The thoughts didn't vanish, but I stopped clinging to them. I simply watched them, as if reflected in a mirror before me. In that stillness, I understood something I had overlooked. The mind isn't the problem. The dust, the accumulated fear, longing, and expectation is what clouds our vision. When the mind is clear, it reflects reality as it is, without judgment or distortion. Over time, the residue of every ignored feeling and every avoided truth accumulates. What we see isn't the world, it's our own projections. I once asked a teacher how to keep the mirror clean. Their response was simple: "You can't stop the dust from falling, but you can choose to clean the mirror every day." When I asked how they replied with a question, "What do you do when a strong emotion appears?" I realized my instinct was always the same, to suppress it or fight it. The teacher smiled and said, "That's where the struggle begins. Every thought and every emotion is like a cloud passing in front of the sun. If you try to hold on to it or push it away, you only make it stronger. But if you let it pass, the sun returns on its own." Since then, whenever I feel overwhelmed, I try to remember this. The mind doesn't need fixing. It needs space. That space allows the storm to settle and the waters to clear. I once walked through a forest after a heavy storm and came across a lake. The rain had churned the water, making it murky and concealing the stones beneath. But as the wind calmed and the rain stopped, the surface began to clear, revealing the depths below. Our minds are like that lake. Agitated, they become clouded. Still, they reveal their natural clarity. Cleaning the mirror of the mind requires courage, the courage to look at what's there. Even when it's painful or uncomfortable, it also requires compassion, the ability to accept that you are not your thoughts or emotions. You are the awareness that watches them come and go. One day, as I watched the sun reflect off the lake, I realized that the mirror doesn't need to be perfect to reflect the truth. It only needs to be sincere. Sincerity begins when we stop identifying with what appears in the mirror. A thought is just a thought. An emotion is just an emotion. When you observe them without attachment, something profound emerges. The awareness behind the mirror, the steady presence that has always been there, untouched and waiting to be seen. If today you feel lost in your thoughts, I invite you to sit in stillness. Don't try to change what appears, just watch it as you would your reflection. Ask yourself, is this the truth, or just a distorted image? You'll see the dust settle, the water clear, and the mirror of your mind reveals what was always there: clarity, peace, and the unshakable truth of who you are. The journey to clear the mirror of the mind is not a destination, but a practice, a daily act of returning to yourself. Each time you wipe away the dust, you don't just reclaim your clarity. You remember that beyond every reflection, you have always been the space where everything happens. The mirror itself is not the goal. It is the path to discovering the light that has always been behind it. Willpower is that light, a quiet but unbreakable fire within. Ego or momentary desires do not drive its fleeting determination. It's something deeper, pure will. Unlike superficial motivation that fades away when faced with challenges, pure will emanates from the soul and endures, even in the absence of tangible progress. I understood its true nature during a time in my life when everything seemed to fall apart. The goals I had carefully set crumbled, and those I trusted weren't there when I needed them. Inside me, a relentless voice whispered, "Give up. This isn't worth it." The voice was loud, insistent. There were moments I nearly listened to, but beneath it, something quiet yet steady refused to give in. It wasn't a thought or even a belief. It was a presence, a pulse that pushed me forward when reason told me to stop. Where does that kind of strength come from? Is it something we learn, or has it always been within us? Over time, I realized that pure will isn't something acquired. It's something uncovered. It's like a seed buried beneath layers of doubt, fear, and excuses. The moment you stop listening to external noise and reconnect with what truly matters, that seed begins to grow. Pure will does not thrive on rewards, validation, or immediate results. It isn't concerned with applause or recognition. It moves you forward because you know deep down that the next step is necessary, not because the path is easy. It's like walking in the dark, trusting that the way will reveal itself with each step you take. Once, while hiking up a steep mountain trail, I experienced this truth firsthand. The day had started with excitement, but the incline was more challenging than I had anticipated. Each step felt heavier than the last. My thoughts began to spiral. Why keep going? What's the point? But then, something shifted. There was no grand epiphany, just a whisper within that said, "One more step." Then came another step, and another. When I finally reached the summit, I realized the view wasn't what I had been chasing. The true reward was discovering my own capacity to move forward when everything in me said I couldn't. Pure will is like an underground river, hidden from sight but powerful enough to shape everything in its path. When you connect with it, you don't need to announce your strength to the world. True strength is silent, resilient, and rooted in a quiet promise you make to yourself. But accessing that strength requires clarity. We often mistake superficial desires for genuine purposes. We chase things, convinced they will bring us happiness or approval, but pure will responds only to what is real, to what the soul knows matters. A teacher once instructed his students to walk a long path while holding a candle that they could only protect with their hands. The wind was strong, and many allowed their flames to be extinguished. Some gave up, calling the task impossible. But one student reached the end with their candle still lit. When asked how, they simply said, "I never stopped walking, and I never looked away from the flame." This is the essence of pure will, maintaining a steady focus on what truly matters, regardless of the intensity of doubt and difficulty. But pure will doesn't demand that you push yourself to the point of breaking. It thrives on balance, on knowing when to move forward and when to rest. It's like breathing. There is a time to inhale and a time to exhale. Pure will doesn't ask you to destroy yourself in pursuit of your path. It calls you to find a rhythm that sustains you, step by step. If life feels unbearably heavy today, if the road seems too long, pause for a moment. Don't listen to the voices in your mind telling you that you're too weak, that it's pointless. Instead, listen more deeply to the silence beneath the noise. There, you will find the spark you had forgotten. It has always been there, waiting for you to remember. When you act from pure will, something extraordinary happens. The obstacles no longer define your path. You stop measuring your success by the outcome and begin to value it by your unwavering commitment to keep moving forward. You realize that true strength isn't in being the first to arrive or in achieving perfection. It's in staying true to yourself, step after step, moment after moment. There is no need to shout your resilience at the world. The strongest light doesn't announce itself, it simply shines. I remember a moment when I stood facing a paradox. I was trying to help someone who was going through a difficult time, but my own life felt like it was falling apart. I felt completely depleted, and it seemed unjust to continue providing assistance when I was exhausted. As I sat in quiet reflection, I thought of the bodhisattva, the being who chooses to stay in the world, to serve despite their own struggles. It hit me with unexpected clarity. To give does not mean to forget yourself. In helping another, you can also find yourself. In service, there is strength, clarity, and purpose. The bodhisattva's renunciation is not a denial of life, but an affirmation of the interconnection that binds us all. It's about releasing what limits you, so you can embrace what liberates you. Instead of avoiding the world, embrace its beauty, pain, and contradictions. If you ever wonder whether you can walk this path, know that the answer does not lie in grand, heroic acts or impossible sacrifices. It lies in the small moments when you choose love over fear, connection over isolation, and compassion over judgment. Each time you make that choice, no matter how small, you are practicing the way of the bodhisattva. The path is not easy, but it is deeply transformative. It teaches you that stepping into the world with an open heart, rather than withdrawing from it, leads to true freedom. By letting go of who you thought you needed to be, you discover who you truly are, not a separate, isolated being, but a unique expression of an infinite whole. The bodhisattva walks not toward a final destination, but toward each present moment, knowing that with every step, with every small act of renunciation, they plant seeds of light in a world that desperately needs them. And in doing so, they not only help others, they transform themselves. Compassion in its purest form is not just a feeling, it is movement, a current that flows between the heart and the world. It isn't something reserved for moments of tenderness or soft words. True compassion moves into action. It is an offering, a bridge between separation and connection that transforms both the giver and the receiver. I once walked down a crowded street, lost in my own thoughts, when I noticed a man sitting on the sidewalk. His clothes were shabby, and his eyes appeared hollow. Beside him a sign read, "I just need to be seen." That phrase halted me abruptly. He wasn't only asking for food or money, he was asking for something deeper, something we often forget to give, presence. In that moment, something broke open inside me. It wasn't pity, it was a connection. I sat beside him and asked his name. For the next few minutes, he told me fragments of his life, his broken dreams, but also his quiet hopes for a better tomorrow. When I finally stood to leave, he thanked me, not for the money I gave him, but for listening. "Today I felt human," he said. His words echoed in me long after I left. Compassion in action doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't require monumental gestures or heroic sacrifices. It often unfolds in the smallest moments, a smile, an attentive ear, a word that comforts at the right time. But for compassion to become action, it takes more than intention. It takes courage, the courage to step out of your world and into someone else's, even if only for a moment. Yet acting with compassion isn't always easy. The mind finds excuses. I'm too busy. I don't know how to help. It's not my responsibility. But deep down, we know that compassion isn't about solving every problem. It's about showing up, about reminding someone that they are not alone. I once saw this truth come to life in a small village where an elderly woman's roof had collapsed. Her neighbors didn't make speeches or ask how it happened. They simply showed up with tools and began rebuilding. She wept as they worked and said, "I don't know how to thank you." One of them replied, "You don't need to. Your well-being is ours. That simple response stayed with me, a reminder that compassion is an affirmation of our shared humanity. In a world that often pulls us toward individualism and isolation, how do we cultivate active compassion? The first step is awareness. You can't act with compassion if you aren't present for the suffering around you. This doesn't mean carrying the weight of the world's problems. It means opening your eyes and your heart to what's unfolding right in front of you. The second step is humility. Sometimes we don't act because we think our small gestures won't matter. But compassion isn't measured by magnitude. It's measured by intention. A single word can heal a wound. A few moments of your time can change someone's day, even their life. Finally, compassion in action requires consistency. One act of kindness isn't enough. It's a daily practice, a commitment reinforced with every opportunity to listen, to help, to be present. There's an old story of a man who carried 2 clay pitchers of water up a long, steep path each day. One of the pitchers had a crack, and every day it leaked water. The cracked pitcher felt ashamed of its flaw, but the man said, "Haven't you noticed the flowers along the path? I planted them where your water drips. Thanks to you, the way is full of life." Compassion doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. Even our imperfections can become sources of love and connection. If you feel like the world needs more compassion, start with yourself. Ask, where can I act? What can I offer, no matter how small? Grand gestures are not the answer, but rather a simple, steady commitment to see others, recognize their humanity, and be present. Compassion in action doesn't just transform others, it transforms you. It reminds you that we are connected and that each act of kindness has unimaginable effects. And in that giving, without expectation, you find something deeper than satisfaction. You find the true meaning of being human. Karma is not a judge handing out rewards and punishments, nor is it a precise balance that measures actions with mathematical accuracy. It is an echo, an energy that reverberates through the universe, reflecting back what we put out. It is the manifestation of universal justice, a principle as profound as it is mysterious. Karma invites us to understand that every action and thought carries a seed that will inevitably grow. I recall my initial encounter with the concept of karma. I was young and impatient, seeking simple answers to complex questions. Why do awful things happen to beneficial people? Why do those who cause harm sometimes seem to thrive? I asked these questions with a mix of frustration and despair. The answer I received was not what I expected. Karma doesn't operate according to your timeline or expectations. It's like an underground current, always present, but rarely visible. I didn't understand those words until years later, when life itself became my teacher. There was a time when my ego drove my seemingly harmless choices. There were careless words, broken promises, and moments of indifference toward those who needed support. Back then, I didn't see the connection between those actions and the solitude, confusion, or dissatisfaction that followed. It was only when I paused to reflect that I began to notice the pattern. Karma wasn't punishing me. It was simply reflecting back what I had sown. However, karma extends beyond negative deeds. It is also the energy that multiplies when you act with love, kindness, and compassion. Once, while walking through a park, I saw an elderly woman struggling to lift a heavy bag. I approached her and offered my help. She smiled, and in her gratitude I felt something unexpected, a quiet, enduring sense of connection. It wasn't a grand act, but that small interaction stayed with me. It was a reminder that even the simplest gestures can create ripples that return to us in ways we don't anticipate. Karma isn't immediate, nor is it always obvious. Sometimes the seeds we sow may take years, even lifetimes, to yield fruit. This can be frustrating, especially when our minds crave quick results and clear answers. However, universal justice operates independently of human time. It operates from a broader understanding, one that surpasses what we can see. I once heard a story about a farmer who planted a tree that would take decades to grow and bear fruit. His neighbors mocked him, saying he wouldn't live to enjoy the harvest. The farmer replied, "This tree isn't for me. It's for those who come after me." That story taught me that karma isn't always personal. Sometimes the actions we take today create benefits that we may never witness, but that others will. The concept of universal justice encourages us to relinquish the necessity to comprehend the why behind each occurrence. There are moments when injustice seems to reign, when suffering feels senseless. In these moments, karma doesn't ask us to resign ourselves to fate, but to reflect. What can I learn from this? How can I transform this energy into something positive? It is not about accepting a predetermined destiny. It's about recognizing that we always are empowered to choose our response. Karma doesn't force us to repeat the same mistakes. It offers us the chance to learn, grow, and change the pattern. Every conscious action and every kind of thought is a step toward a more positive cycle and a deeper connection to universal justice. But justice is not only about balancing individual actions, it is a reminder of our interconnectedness. Every thought, word, and action affects us, others, and the world. We are like waves in an ocean, moving in harmony or discord, depending on the energy we carry within. If you ever feel that the world is unjust, that things are unbalanced, remember this: universal justice may not always be visible, but it is always at work. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, adds to the whole. Every conscious choice, every effort to be better, contributes to a greater equilibrium, one we may not see in the moment, but one that is real, steady, and inevitable. Karma is not something to fear, it is something to honor. It reminds us that our thoughts, feelings, and actions create our reality. The universe does not impose universal justice upon us. We shape it with every action we take. When you truly understand this, something shifts within you. You no longer seek vengeance because you know that balance will come in ways you may never comprehend. You no longer act solely for self-interest because you recognize that your actions have a wider impact. And most of all, you begin to live with the certainty that every seed you plant, whether of love or fear, will eventually bear fruit. Karma and universal justice remind us that we are part of something greater, a tapestry of energy and intention that connects all beings. In that recognition, we find not only responsibility, but hope. If every action holds significance, then each day presents a fresh chance to cultivate a better world, not only for ourselves but for everyone in our vicinity. In the noise of the world and the distractions of the mind, it's simple to lose connection with our deeper truth. That is where the real practice begins, learning to hear the whisper of dharma in the midst of chaos. There is an ancient story of a musician who became obsessed with perfecting his craft. He practiced every note tirelessly, refining every detail. But the more he strived for perfection, the less joy he felt. Frustrated, he abandoned his instrument and simply walked. In the stillness of the forest, he heard the wind moving through the trees and the gentle murmur of a stream. And suddenly, he understood. Music wasn't about mastery alone. It was about feeling, about letting the sound flow through him as an expression of the present moment. In that instant, he realized that dharma wasn't about meeting expectations. It was about surrendering to who he already was. Dharma isn't a task to complete or a destination to reach. It's a process of unfolding into your true selves. When you live from that truth, you don't need to struggle to belong. You already do. But living in alignment with your dharma isn't always easy. There will be times when the path feels dark, when you doubt your choices, when the weight of external expectations pulls you away from yourself. Yet, even in those moments, dharma is there, waiting for your return. It doesn't judge you for drifting. It simply invites you back. Once, during a moment of meditation, I had a vivid image of a river flowing gently through mountains and valleys. Sometimes, the river met obstacles, fallen branches, jagged rocks, but it never stopped. It didn't fight the obstacles. It flowed around them, finding a new path. Dharma, akin to that river, demonstrates that despite the numerous deviations we may encounter, we can consistently revert to the inherent course of our existence. Living in harmony with dharma doesn't mean everything will be easy. There will be challenges because growth always requires stepping out of the familiar. But those challenges are not punishments. They are invitations to deepen your alignment with your truth. Dharma also reminds us that we are not separate from the whole. Every action we take from a place of alignment ripples outward, touching lives in ways we may never see. When we live our truth, we inspire others to do the same, creating a web of connection that expands infinitely. If you feel lost or disconnected, pause. Close your eyes and ask yourself, am I living in alignment with my truth? Am I acting from love, authenticity, and purpose? Listen without judgment. Sometimes the answer doesn't come immediately, but the simple act of asking is already a step toward your dharma. The power of dharma lies in its ability to transform even the smallest actions into expressions of greatness. When you live from this connection, your actions become insignificant as long as they originate from your heart. Dharma doesn't define you. It reveals you layer by layer until you remember that you have always been part of something greater, something eternal, something infinitely wise and loving. The world does not impose the call of duty toward humanity. Rather, it arises from the depths of our being. Our conscience reminds us that we are not alone, and that the impact of our actions extends beyond the individual. It is an act of collective love, an expression of connection to the fabric that binds us all. I remember a moment when this call became clear to me. I was walking down a crowded street, surrounded by strangers absorbed in their own worlds. The air was thick with noise, urgency, and a sense of disconnection. And then I saw a little girl let go of her mother's hand to pick up a piece of litter from the ground. She smiled and tossed it into the nearest trash can before returning to her mother, as though she had done nothing extraordinary. That small act, simple but significant, struck me deeply. The girl wasn't thinking about the global impact of her gesture or seeking approval. She acted from a place of pure connection, a quiet sense of responsibility to the world around her. The duty toward humanity isn't about saving the world in one grand act. It's a daily commitment, a series of small choices that together create a greater impact. It involves taking a moment to listen to someone who requires attention. It's sharing what you have even when it feels like little. It's treating every person you encounter with respect, recognizing their humanity and inherent worth. Where does this sense of duty come from? For some, it's born from empathy, the ability to feel another's pain as their own. Others find it rooted in a sense of morality, a commitment to act morally simply because it's right. Fundamentally, this obligation stems from the recognition of our interconnectedness, where there is no me apart from us. Every action and every word create ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. I once asked a teacher how we can fulfill our duty to humanity when the world seems so chaotic, when our small efforts feel insignificant against the scale of global problems. The teacher's eyes, calm with the wisdom of countless lifetimes, met mine. Your duty, they said, is not to fix the entire world. Your duty is to be a light in the space you occupy. If each of us did that, there would be no corner of the earth left in darkness. That answer changed me. I realized that duty toward humanity isn't measured by grandeur. It's measured by sincerity. If an act of kindness comes from the heart, it never goes to waste. But fulfilling this duty isn't always easy. There will be moments when you feel tired, overwhelmed, even disillusioned by the world's indifference. However, it's crucial to persevere during these challenging times. Every act of kindness reminds us that we are not alone and that humanity can rise even in chaos. When you live from this truth, you understand that Dharma is not a distant ideal. It's a way of being. In that state, you remember that every choice, no matter how small, can create something extraordinary. You become part of a rhythm that flows through everything, a rhythm that whispers, "You belong." There's an ancient story of an old man who walked along the shore each morning, gently picking up stranded starfish and returning them to the ocean. One day, a young man approached him and asked, "Why do you do this? There are thousands of starfish here. You can't possibly save them all. What difference does it make?" The old man paused, holding a starfish in his hand. As he placed it back in the water, he replied, "To this one, it makes all the difference." That story has always stayed with me. It reminds me that no matter how overwhelming the world's problems may seem, what matters is that we do what we can, where we can. Our duty toward humanity is not about perfection. It's about intention. It's about choosing love over fear, connection over indifference, and giving over receiving. This duty extends beyond our individual lives. It's a responsibility to future generations. We are here not just to live our own lives, but to leave a legacy, to plant seeds for others to harvest. Every act of kindness, every effort to build a better world, is an investment in a future we may never see, but one we know is worth nurturing. If you ever feel small, wondering if your actions truly matter, remember this: you don't need to do something grand. Being authentic, acting from the heart, and seeing each day as an opportunity to improve society is enough. Sometimes that contribution is as simple as a smile, a kind word, or a moment of presence with someone who needs it. Other times, it may be a larger calling, an act that changes lives. But the intention remains the same: to serve, to connect, to love. Our duty toward humanity is not a burden, it's a privilege. It is a reminder that we are not separate, that each of us plays a unique role in this vast theater of life. When we respond to that call, we don't just transform the world, we transform ourselves. In giving, we discover that we already have everything we need. In connecting, we remember that we have never been alone. And in love, we understand that our true purpose has always been to contribute to something greater than ourselves. Samadhi, the state of profound unity, is not something you can seek, grasp, or possess. It is a state of oneness, a fusion with everything, where the boundaries between self and other, time and space, dissolve. Samadhi is not an ordinary achievement, as attaining it requires surrender rather than effort. Samadhi is the moment when the mind stops resisting and the heart opens completely, allowing life to flow through you without barriers or conditions. When I first heard about Samadhi, it seemed like an unattainable ideal, something reserved for mystics and sages. How could one stop being self and become everything? The idea seemed impossible, even absurd. But over time I began to understand that Samadhi isn't something external to pursue. It is a return to what we have always been. It is a deep remembering of our true nature. I recall a fleeting glimpse of this union during an evening walk through the forest. As the sun sank, the soft sound of a river and the quiet rustle of leaves enveloped me. I stopped and simply stood by the water, watching its effortless flow. In that moment, something shifted. The boundary between myself and my surroundings seemed to dissolve. I was no longer an observer of the river. I was the river, the wind, the trees, all at once. There were no thoughts, no sense of time or identity, only presence. It was brief, but it left a lasting imprint. It wasn't samadhi in its highest form, but it was a glimpse of what it means to be fully unified with everything. Samadhi is not reserved for mountaintops or the depths of meditation. It can be touched in the simplest moments, when we stop clinging to our sense of self and allow life to move through us. It is not a state you attain by sheer willpower. Rather, it occurs when you relinquish control. It's like floating in water. The more you struggle to control your movements, the more you sink. But when you surrender, the water holds you. Reaching this state isn't easy. The mind is conditioned to separate, to label, to divide. This is me and that is not me. This habit of separation prevents us from seeing the interconnected reality of existence. The practice, then, isn't to chase samadhi, but to dissolve the inner barriers. It's not about reaching something, it's about releasing everything you're not. A teacher once explained samadhi to me in a way I'll never forget. Imagine you are a wave in the ocean, they said. For a time you feel separate, unique, different from the others. But deep down you know that you are not just a wave. You are the ocean itself. When the wave realizes this, it no longer fears disappearing because it understands it was never separate. That metaphor helped me understand that samadhi isn't the erasure of self. It's the realization that the self was never apart. It's the awareness that at our core, we have always been the ocean, even when we believed we were only waves. The journey to samadhi involves practices like meditation, contemplation, and detachment. But these are not ends in themselves. They are tools to help us remember. Each time you sit in silence and observe your thoughts without clinging to them, each time you choose love over fear, you are dismantling the walls that separate you from the whole. Samadhi is not an emotional state, though it may fill you with indescribable peace. It is not a mental state, though it may bring profound clarity. It is something beyond the mind, beyond emotion. A direct experience of being one with everything, without needing to explain or understand it. Samadhi isn't a static end. It is a doorway to a completely new way of living. When you touch that state, even for an instant, it changes how you see the world. You stop perceiving others as separate from you and begin to feel a deep connection with all that exists. This realization doesn't pull you away from life. It allows you to engage with it from a place of infinite love and compassion. If you've ever wondered if it's possible to experience this union with everything, the answer is yes. Not because it's something you must search for, but because it's already within you. In silence, in surrender, and in the moments when you allow yourself to be fully present, samadhi begins to reveal itself. It is not something you achieve through effort. It is something you remember when you stop seeking. Samadhi is the quiet reminder that we have never been separated. Every being, every star, and every leaf on a tree is part of an infinite whole. This realization brings peace and the profound truth that we are the universe experiencing itself, the river, the wind, the whole, and the void together. The eternal light of the Spirit is as real as your heartbeat but cannot be seen or touched. It is the divine spark that lives in every being, the unchanging core that remains beyond time, beyond birth and death. It is the essence of who we are, the luminous thread that connects all souls and guides us home. I remember the first time this light made itself known to me. It was not a grand revelation but a quiet night, dark both in the sky and within me. I felt lost, disconnected, like I was trapped in a tunnel with no exit. I sat in stillness, searching for answers, but my mind was full of noise. Then, amidst that internal chaos, something shifted. It wasn't a voice or a vision. It was a presence, a small but unextinguishable flame at the center of my being. It didn't light up the whole tunnel, but its warmth was enough to remind me that I was not alone. That flame was the eternal light of the Spirit. It wasn't something I discovered. It was something that had always been there, waiting for me to stop searching outward and look inward. A select few are not the only ones who may access eternal light. Every soul has a birthright to it. It can be heard in the first cry of a baby, the wind whispering through the trees, a child's laughter, or the tears of a person who is in suffering. It is the motion of the cosmos and the motionlessness that keeps it all together. Therefore, why do we frequently feel cut off from this light? The layers of doubt, fear, and false identities that we erect around ourselves hold the key to the solution. Nothing, not even these layers, can put out the light, yet they can block it out, like clouds in the sky. Even when we can't see the sun, it still beams through the clouds. The road to eternal light is a voyage inward rather than outward. It involves removing our masks, letting go and letting them fall off. A little bit of that light shines through every time we let go of an attachment, a fear, or a judgment. I recall a lesson that a spiritual teacher taught me. They said to me, "The eternal light of the Spirit is already there. It doesn't spark because of anything extraordinary you do. Clearing the path for it to shine is your job, not creating it." That lesson taught me that this journey is about unveiling what has always been there, not about striving for anything outside of ourselves. The eternal light is also a reminder of our unity. Although we often feel separate, each of us is like a ray of sunlight originating from the same source. When you allow your light to shine, you not only illuminate your own path, you help others find theirs. It is an act of love, not just for yourself, but for all of creation. But living from this light requires courage. It means being willing to face your shadows, to look directly at everything that has kept you in darkness. It means understanding that the light is not at war with the darkness. It embraces it, transforms it. Every shadow you face, every wound you heal, becomes a channel through which the light can flow more freely. I once heard a story about a man who found an old, dusty lamp in the corner of a forgotten room. Initially, he mistook the lamp's lack of shine for a broken one, But as he began to wipe away the layers of dust, the light emerged, illuminating everything around him. The man realized that the lamp had never stopped shining. It had only been covered. We are like that lamp. The light within us is waiting for us to clear away the dust, the doubts, the fears, the limiting beliefs. We cannot extinguish the eternal light because it is infinite and unchanging. It is a reminder that even in our darkest moments we are more than our circumstances. We are more than our stories. We are that eternal spark, that unbreakable connection to the divine. If today you feel distant from that light, pause for a moment. Close your eyes and breathe. Don't search outward, just sit with yourself. At first, you may only sense silence or noise, but if you remain still, if you stay present, you will notice something, a small spark, a gentle warmth, a reminder of who you have always been. The eternal light is not a destination, it is the journey itself. It is the sun that never stops shining even when clouds obscure it. And when we allow this light to guide our lives, everything changes. The shadows don't disappear, but they no longer frighten us. The challenges don't vanish, but we face them with a renewed sense of purpose, because we know that this light is our essence. And when we recognize it within ourselves, we begin to see it in everyone else. The eternal light is love, unity, and the whole reflected in every part. It is who we are, who we have always been, and who we will always be. And when we live from this light, we don't just find our own peace, we help illuminate the world, one moment, one action, one heart at a time. A teacher once explained the fire that does not consume through a simple metaphor. Imagine a candle burning in a dark room, they said. If you focus on protecting the flame, afraid it will go out, you trap it, starving it of air. But if you trust the flame and let it burn freely, it will light everything around you. That teaching revealed a profound truth. This fire doesn't need control, it needs release. But how do you release a fire that is already burning? The answer lies in transformation. The fire that does not consume doesn't destroy, it transforms. It takes our doubts and turns them into trust, our fears into courage, and our darkness into light. For this transformation to occur, we must allow the fire to act. We must hand over our burdens, release our resistance, and trust that its warmth will lead us back to who we really are. Once, during meditation, I imagined with every exhale that I was surrendering my worries, judgments, and limitations. They didn't magically disappear, but something shifted. I felt that the fire accepted them, not to destroy, but to reshape them. I realized then that this fire is not here to fight against us, but to remind us that we are larger than our shadows and stronger than our doubts. This fire also reminds us of our connection to everything. It is the same fire that burns in the sun, warms the earth, and fuels the stars. It is the spark that unites all beings, whispering that we are not separate. When we recognize this fire within ourselves, we begin to see it in others. We understand that behind every face, every action, and every story is a flame waiting to be seen, honored, and celebrated. But living from this fire is not always easy. There are moments when life's storms seem to extinguish it, when the weight of our struggles makes us forget that it's there. Yet the fire never disappears. It only hides, waiting for us to look inward again. In those moments, we must remember that we don't need to ignite anything. We only need to clear away the clouds of our minds and allow the flame to shine once more. The fire that does not consume is also a call to action. It is not a passive flame. It pushes us to move, to grow, to transform the world around us. It reminds us that we are not here just to survive, but to live fully, to be a light in a world that so often craves warmth and clarity. If today you feel that this fire has dimmed, close your eyes and direct your attention to your center, to that space where your purest essence resides. You don't need to search outward or force anything. Just feel it, a gentle warmth, an eternal spark that has never left you. Let its light envelop you, let its heat dissolve your fears, and let its energy remind you of who you really are. This fire cannot be lost because it is who you are. It is the force that sustains you, the light that guides you, and the heat that propels you forward. And when you allow this fire to burn freely, you realize that it doesn't just transform your life, It illuminates the lives of those around you, creating a circle of light that never stops expanding. This fire is eternal and unbreakable. It does not consume because it doesn't need to. It transforms because that is its nature. It is the spark that has always been with you, waiting for you to remember that even in your darkest moments, you are still a flame in the great fire of existence. The voice of silence is not heard with the ears, but its echo resonates in the depths of the soul. It is an eternal whisper cutting through the noise of the world, guiding us toward our truest self. It is not a command or a shout. It is a soft, steady invitation to return to our center and remember who we are beyond distractions, fears, and illusions. The first time I tried to listen to this voice, I felt frustrated. I had been told that silence would bring answers, but all I found was the chaos of my thoughts. I closed my eyes and searched for stillness, but my mind kept speaking. Unfinished tasks, past mistakes, future worries. How can there be a voice in the midst of this noise? I asked myself. The answer came unexpectedly, not as a sound, but as a space between thoughts, a moment of clarity that appeared when I stopped resisting. The voice of silence doesn't demand to be heard. It waits patiently for you to make space for it. It is always there, beneath the noise, like the sky that remains untouched behind the densest clouds. To hear it, you must learn to be present, to let the noise of your mind settle without fighting it. One day this voice became clear to me. I had wandered through a forest, my heart full of questions and doubts, hoping for some external sign to guide me. I sat by a river, exhausted, and simply watched the water flow. And then, something changed, not with words or dramatic revelations, but with a deep peace, a quiet understanding that everything was as it should be. The voice of silence doesn't give answers in the form of words. It offers clarity in the form of presence. It doesn't tell you what to do. It reveals what you already know deep within. It reflects your inner truth, connecting you to the part of yourself untouched by fear, ego, or doubt. Listening to this voice requires practice. In a world filled with noise, both external and internal, it is easy to lose ourselves in distractions. But silence is not something we find. It is something we allow. It is the space that emerges when we stop filling our minds with unnecessary thoughts and surrender to the present moment. When you listen, you realize that your actions are no longer driven by fear or insecurity, but by a profound connection to what truly matters. You become more present, more conscious, and more capable of living and acting from a place of love and authenticity. And in that silence, the fire that does not consume begins to shine brighter, guiding you not only toward yourself, but toward the world, one steady flame at a time. The voice of silence does not impose answers. It simply reminds you that the answers have always been within. It is not an external source, but a reflection of your own inner wisdom. In that quiet reminder, you find something deeper than answers. You find peace, clarity, and a sense of purpose that does not depend on external circumstances. If today you feel lost or overwhelmed by the noise of the world, take a moment to pause. You don't need a special place or a complicated technique. Just close your eyes, breathe, and allow yourself to feel everything as it is, without judgment, without resistance. At first, you may hear nothing but the hum of your own thoughts, but that's okay. The voice of silence is patient. It will wait until you're ready to listen. Nirvana is not a distant place or an end you reach after years of searching. It is a state, a fullness within emptiness, a deep rest from the endless cycle of desires and attachments. It is supreme liberation, not because it signals an ending, but because it leads you back to your origin, to an existence unburdened by conditions, a peace that does not rely on anything external. I first learned about nirvana as the extinction of suffering and the transcendence of the self and the world. Though beautiful, those words felt distant, abstract. How can you encounter something that transcends the intellect and defies linguistic expression? The answer, I later learned, is not in understanding nirvana, but in experiencing it, even if only for a moment. Life often feels like an unending wheel. We chase happiness in things, in people, and in accomplishments, but each time we believe we've found it, it disappears like sand through our fingers. This cycle of desire and frustration is what we call samsara, the prison we build by clinging to what is fleeting, by identifying with a self that is constantly seeking satisfaction. The key to understanding nirvana is realizing that suffering doesn't come from the external world. It comes from our relationship with it. Pain doesn't bind us. Our resistance to it does. Pleasure doesn't trap us. Our attachment to its permanence does. Liberation begins when we release attachment and resistance. I remember a lesson life offered me when I was facing a major loss that felt like it would consume me entirely. For weeks, I fought the pain, tried to overcome it, ignored it, and escaped it. But one day, I stopped resisting. I let the pain be. I looked at it without trying to change it or make sense of it. At that moment, something shifted. The pain didn't vanish, but it no longer controlled me. It was as though I had found a space beyond suffering, a quiet place where everything simply was. That space was a glimpse of nirvana. It is not the denial of life or its hardships. It is the transformation of how we relate to them. It is the recognition that, at our core, we are already free, though we've forgotten that freedom by identifying with our stories, desires, and emotions. Nirvana is not the absence of everything, as some fear. It is the absence of what binds us. It is the fire that burns without consuming. It is the light that shines without needing the dark. When you reach that state, even briefly, you realize you need nothing to be whole. You already are whole, you are already peaceful. But the path to nirvana is not easy. It requires letting go, not through forced renunciation, but through a deep understanding that nothing external can define or complete you. It requires observing the mind, understanding its patterns, and releasing the constant craving for more that keeps us trapped in samsara. A teacher once explained nirvana to me with a simple but powerful metaphor. Imagine you're holding a rope tightly, trying to control what's on the other end. Your hands grow worn and wounded, but you keep gripping it because you believe letting go means losing. Nirvana is simply letting go of the rope and realizing you never needed to hold it in the first place. That teaching showed me that nirvana is not something to achieve, because it isn't outside of us. It's something we remember when we stop clinging to what we are not. Superior liberation is the ability to fully experience the world without being enslaved by its highs and lows. It's seeing suffering, pleasure, joy, and pain for what they are, passing experiences that do not define our essence. Living with our feet grounded in the earth and our hearts rooted in the infinite is what it means. There's an ancient story of a monk who attained nirvana while walking through a bustling marketplace. He wasn't meditating in a secluded cave or practicing extreme austerity. He was simply present, observing the noise, the movement, and the life around him. At that moment, he stopped resisting the chaos and saw the harmony behind it all. I learned from that story that nirvana is not exclusive to isolated moments. It can be found in the midst of noise, activity, and life itself, if we learn to look from the right place. Nirvana ends suffering because it ends our identification with what makes us suffer. It reveals that we are not our stories, our emotions, or our possessions. We are the awareness that observes, the stillness beneath it all. And when you touch that truth, even for an instant, something within you changes forever. If today you feel weighed down, as though the chains of samsara are too strong, remember this. Nirvana is not a place you must reach. It is a state that already exists within you. You don't need to search outward or struggle to attain it. You need only to release, to trust, and to allow your true nature to be revealed. Supreme liberation is not an ending. It is a beginning. It is a return to what you've always been. Infinite peace, unshakable freedom, and a profound connection to all that is. When you allow yourself to experience that truth, even for a moment, you discover that there is no greater gift, no greater purpose than remembering that you are already whole. Our teacher once explained the journey back into the world with a simple metaphor. The lotus grows in the mud, but remains unstained. Its roots are anchored in the earth, yet its flower opens toward the sky. That image stayed with me, teaching me that no matter how chaotic or complicated our surroundings may be, we can choose to live from a place of purity, truth, and connection. Returning to the world is also an act of humility. After experiencing the peace of inner silence, it's tempting to believe we've risen above the mundane concerns of life. But that thought is a trap of the ego, a subtle attempt to separate the spiritual from the earthly. The true return means recognizing that we are not above anyone else. Spiritual awakening doesn't isolate us, it deepens our connection to humanity. I remember my own experience of returning after a time of retreat and reflection. I had immersed myself in silence, found moments of profound stillness, and felt clarity bloom within me. However, upon my return to daily life, the responsibilities, small talk, and endless demands overwhelmed me. At first, it felt as though I was losing everything I had gained, as though the noise of the world was drowning out the peace I had found. With time, I realized that silence was meant to teach me how to listen to the world, despite the noise. Returning to the world does not mean abandoning the spiritual path. It means living it fully. Any interaction, decision, or moment can be turned into a meditation, a prayer, or an opportunity to remember and share our true selves. There is a story of a wise teacher who, after years of meditation in the mountains, returned to his village. The people gathered around him, expecting profound teachings and extraordinary gestures. But instead, he began working in the fields, helping with daily tasks, and listening to those who came to him. When asked why he wasn't teaching grand truths, he replied, "My life is my teaching. Every small action is a chance to live the truth I've found." That story reminded me that the return to the world is not a grand task. It is an ongoing act of presence and authenticity. It's bringing silence into the noise, letting the peace we've found illuminate our path and others. If today you feel weighed down by life, as though the demands and noise are pulling you away from what matters, remember this: returning to the world is not an interruption of the spiritual journey. It is its culmination. It is not about finding peace in isolation, but about being peaceful in the place where you stand. It's not about waiting for a perfect moment, but about acting with love and truth in the present one. Returning to the world is an act of love for humanity. It is understandable that even though we have touched eternity, we are still part of this world. And in that connection, in that service, we find true fulfillment. There is no greater purpose than remembering who we are and helping others remember the same. The world doesn't need perfection, it needs authenticity. It doesn't require grand gestures, but small acts of love carried out with intention. When we live with that understanding, returning to the world stops being a burden and becomes an opportunity to be a bridge between the earthly and the divine, to bring the light of silence into the heart of noise, to be a living expression of the truth that never fades. Selfless service is an act of surrender that transcends the ego, a manifestation of the deepest, purest form of love. It's not an exchange or an obligatory sacrifice. It's an offering that comes from the heart, expecting nothing in return. It is a reminder that, at our core, we are all one, and that in serving others, we also serve ourselves. I remember the first time I truly understood what it meant to serve without personal interest. I was helping someone through a difficult time. At first, my intention was clear, to ease their burden. But without realizing it, I began to expect something in return, a word of thanks, recognition, some sign that my effort was being seen. When those expectations failed to materialize, I experienced frustration. Why am I doing this if no one appreciates it? I asked myself. That frustration became a mirror, showing me that I wasn't acting from a place of complete selflessness. Selfless service doesn't require rewards or validation. It comes from a deep connection with the other, from the understanding that their suffering is not separate from ours and that their needs are also our own. When we serve from that place, the act itself becomes its own reward. There is an inexplicable joy in giving, in offering what we can without seeking anything in return. A teacher once used a simple metaphor to explain selfless service. The sun doesn't wait for gratitude to shine, nor the rain for thanks to nourish the earth. They give because giving is their nature. That teaching showed me that true service isn't something we do. It's something we allow to flow through us when we set the ego aside and connect with our most authentic essence. In a world that often pushes us toward individualism, service reminds us that we are not separated, and that our actions ripple beyond ourselves. I once met a woman who dedicated her life to caring for homeless children. I asked her how she found the strength to do what she did every day, facing so many challenges. Her response was simple: "I don't do it for me. I do it because I can, because someone needs it." Her words stayed with me, teaching me that service is not an obligation. It is an opportunity to contribute, to make even a small difference. But serving without expectation isn't always easy. The ego constantly whispers, reminding us of our own needs, asking, "What's in it for me?" And yet every time we move beyond that voice, every time we act from a place of true generosity, something within us changes. We free ourselves from the need to control or receive. We discover immense freedom in simply giving. Selfless service is also an act of humility. It requires us to recognize that we are not superior to those we help, that we are not solving their problems, but simply being a channel for something greater. It is understandable that in giving we also receive, even if not in the way we expect. Remember this: greatness doesn't measure the impact of selfless service. It doesn't matter if your gesture is small or seemingly insignificant. What matters is the love you pour into it. In the end, it's not grand acts that change the world, but the accumulation of small actions carried out with a pure heart. Service isn't a sacrifice, it's a gift. It is the act of giving without losing anything, for in offering yourself to others, you reconnect with the deepest part of who you are. And in that connection, you find peace and joy that no external reward could ever match. I remember a moment in my life when the wisdom of the heart spoke with a clarity I had never experienced before. I found myself at a pivotal point, confronted with a challenging choice. My mind, full of logic and reason, pointed toward a path that seemed practical, safe, and predictable. But within me, there was a quiet, almost imperceptible voice whispering, "This is not your path." At first I tried to ignore it. How could the heart know more than the mind? I asked myself. Yet, the more I tried to rationalize my choice, the more restless I felt. Finally, I stopped resisting and allowed myself to listen, not with my ears, but with my full presence. And when I did, I knew the way forward. I couldn't explain it in words, but it felt unmistakably right. The wisdom of the heart isn't loud. It doesn't compete with the constant noise of the mind. Beneath the turbulence of our thoughts, it resembles a tranquil river, patiently awaiting our notice. But to hear it, we must learn to quiet the mind, not by force, but by allowing its noise to settle as we gently turn our attention inward. We often confuse the wisdom of the heart with fleeting emotions, but they are not the same. Emotions are transient reactions shaped by our fears, desires, and experiences. The wisdom of the heart, in contrast, is steady and unchanging, a knowing that arises when we release what we think we know and open ourselves to what we truly are. A teacher once explained it to me with a metaphor that stayed with me. Your heart is like a still lake. When the wind stirs the water, the surface becomes restless, and you can no longer see the bottom. But when the water is calm, everything becomes clear. That teaching showed me that we don't need to create or seek the wisdom of the heart. It is already within us. All we need is to let the waters settle and allow the stillness to reveal what has always been present. The wisdom of the heart also connects us to others in ways the mind cannot. While the mind divides, judges, and analyzes, the heart sees beyond appearances and recognizes our shared humanity. When we act from the heart, our actions not only benefit us, they ripple outward to touch those around us. I remember a time when this connection became powerfully clear. A friend was going through a difficult time, and I tried to help by offering advice and practical solutions. Nothing seemed to ease his pain. Then I decided to simply be present, to listen without judgment or the need to fix anything. At that moment, something shifted. I didn't say anything extraordinary, but he felt seen, heard, and accepted. The wisdom of the heart doesn't need grand gestures or eloquent words. Its power lies in presence. But listening to the heart requires courage. It often leads us down paths that don't seem logical or safe. It challenges us to trust, to surrender control, and to act from a place of authenticity, even when we don't fully understand where it will take us. Yet when we follow its guidance, we discover something extraordinary. The heart is never wrong. Its path may not be the easiest, but it is always the truest. Our traveler encountered a divergence in the path. One path was wide, straight, and well lit. The other was narrow and winding, and disappeared into a dark forest. The traveler hesitated, but something within urged him toward the less obvious path. As he walked, he encountered challenges, but also unexpected beauty, meaningful encounters, and lessons that he would never have found on the easier road. That story reminds me that the wisdom of the heart doesn't seek comfort. It seeks truth. If you feel trapped in your thoughts today as though the answers you seek are out of reach, pause for a moment. Place a hand over your heart, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what do I know beyond what I think? What is my heart telling me? The answer may not come immediately or in words, but if you listen with attention, you will feel a direction, a certainty that doesn't require explanation. The wisdom of the heart is not a mystery to solve, but a truth to embody. It reminds us that beneath the mind's noise and the world's distractions, there is an inner guide, always present, always available. And when we act from that wisdom, our lives align with a deeper purpose, a truer path. The heart not only guides us toward what is best for us, it leads us to be a light for others. Living from the heart not only brings us inner peace, but also serves as a reflection of that peace for those around us. And in that reflection, we remember that at our core, we all share the same light, the same truth, and the same timeless wisdom that arises from the eternal love within us. The spiritual path is infinite. It has no beginning and no end. It is a continuous flow of learning, transformation, and connection. Along the way, we move forward, we stumble, we fall, but we never stop walking. Even when we feel lost, the path remains, patiently waiting for us to see it again. It is a constant reminder that no matter where we are always part of something vast, something eternal. Looking back at the steps we've taken, we can see the imprints left by our decisions, our fears, and our moments of clarity. But we also see something more, the quiet presence of a guiding force that has carried us even in our darkest times. Some call it spirit, love, or simply truth. It isn't something outside of us. It is the very essence of who we are. The heart reminds us of this over and over. We belong to something greater than ourselves. And when we trust its wisdom, we walk not only toward our own freedom, but also toward becoming a beacon for others to follow. A teacher once told me, "The path is not something you find, it's something you create with each step." Those words changed me. I realized that we don't need to have all the answers or see the final destination. All we need is to take the next step, trusting that the way will unfold as we move forward. The eternal nature of the journey teaches us something profound. We never walk alone. Our path incorporates every encounter and shared moment, serving as a constant reminder of our profound interconnectedness. The path is not linear. There are unexpected turns, moments of stillness, and even steps backward that teach us more than progress ever could. However, each phase possesses a distinct beauty, a lesson exclusive to that particular moment. The key is to be present, to embrace each step, even when we don't fully understand where it leads. This eternal journey asks us to let go of expectations, fears, and the need to control. It invites us to trust that there is a greater purpose at play, even when it's not visible. Letting go is not a surrender of defeat. It's the recognition that we are not separate from the flow of life. By releasing our grip, we become part of that flow, carried not away from ourselves but deeper into who we truly are. If the path feels uncertain today, if the challenges seem too great, remember, you don't need to know everything to keep moving. This step, this breath contains everything you need. Trust that each small step is leading you closer to your truth. In the quiet reflections of this journey, I've discovered a simple truth. The path is not about reaching a destination. It's about remembering who we are as we walk. It's not about gathering answers, but about shedding everything we are not, until only our purest essence remains. That essence is love. It is peace. It is the eternal connection that unites us all. The path is infinite because we are infinite. Beyond this life, beyond this body, the journey continues, carrying with it the lessons, the experiences, and the light we gather along the way. There is no true end, only the understanding that the path itself is the purpose. And when we walk it with love, compassion, and the wisdom of an open heart, each step becomes a celebration of life, an expression of the eternity that lives within us.